Hello. Hello, greetings. Wow, now the day goes by, of course, now that with now that the next level accelerated everything. So I guess I want to there was an update to the Comet Atlas that I heard the other day that it was half as wide as the sun to our appearance. They're still describing it as a rock that's made or dust and ice and I guess the ice is methane, and I'm not saying it doesn't have all those components. I'm sure it does. Anyway, so I don't need to beleaguer that issue, but it's in some form of compressed state, right? That's because some of the pictures from NASA, when they landed on comets and things like that, and like from Halley's, showed jets, like the shape of a bowling pin. One of them was, and it had jets on the tips, as if it was causing it to spin. That's the way I was looking at it. I don't know if that's what the jets were doing. It might have been all. Anyway. So Comet Atlas actually was brightening a lot more. That's a picture of it to the right of my text screen on the bottom. And the same thing happened to Betelgeuse. You can see the picture on the left there, Betelgeuse on the top right of my screen is from, I believe it's January of 2019. And then in December 2019, to the right of it, is the same picture, is the same Betelgeuse, or Betelgeuse, however you want to say it, or goose, Betelgeuse. I don't know if that's from Doe's mind, but he and T always has like a what some people could see as a corny or silly sense of humor, and but not a sarcastic sense of humor or a condescending sense of humor. Well, some people could see it as condescending, but not. To people, but to people who think they're bigger than life. Hey, Kate's Biz and Jeff. Greetings. And so the picture to the right is Betelgeuse from, like I just said, and you can see that it's hard to see on my picture, or if you don't have the image. It's got a lot less of it that's bright, noticeably so. Which that's big for a star, because also the shape of it is different with the part that's lit up the most. And so that's two things that are different about it. And I believe it started to brighten again, actually. It started to dim. And then it might have started to brighten again. I'm not sure about that part. But it did start to dim, so they thought that the brightening was over. Or maybe it just stayed the same. Well, it was brightening a little bit for quite a while, I think for almost a year, my understanding. But, I'm sure you can find all that How come I go out of the picture when I go that way? Oh, because I got this thing. Just doesn't look like I'm doing that. All right. I don't know. It's weird the way that. Well, it's catching me sideways, right? Like I'm not looking directly. Well, now I am because I'm looking at this other screen, the wrong screen. Anyway, so that's happening, and oh yeah, well, Atlas got brighter a long ways before they thought it would, because they've watched comets go towards the sun before, and they're not sure whether it's going to break up or of course. One YouTuber who I got this story from, I forgot his name, Dabu9, I think is the name, his handle, and he compared it to Ison, because Ison also was a sun grazing comet, sun diving comet, and they were wondering if it would break up or just vanish inside the sun. And what Ison ended up doing was coming out of the sun at a different point from what the trajectory before it entered behind the sun happened, a different trajectory. So and then it was tracked to by this YouTuber named BP Earthwatch, Jesse I think is his name, who was doing a lot of tracking of everything NASA was doing at that time. And so it was very helpful to me. And he was also dissecting the images that they would provide by depixelating them. And that's where he saw that comet Ison looked like it was three in the shape of like a V formation, with two of the objects being rectangular, like to form the wings. Bright lights, and that. So when Ison came out of that sun, it was he tracked it, and it looked like it had a huge object following it that they were joking about. That looked like a Pac-Man kind of object, but it was like humongous, and that humongous object has been seen in a number of pictures. It looks like a donut sometimes in some of the pictures, in space. Like one is that when Mars flashed, when Comet Elenin, I think, went to perihelion with it, flew right in front of it. It flashed, and the whole planet flashed really bright, and it was taken. They've got satellites trained on these things, and if they're not, the next level probably sees to it that they look at it. They don't even know why they're looking at Mars necessarily, but for our sakes, I think that's the way it can work. I'm not saying positive that's the way it works, because I'm not the next level crew, and I'm not privy to that kind of information, and nobody is on Earth right now that I'm aware of. I don't think there is anybody else. Well, I'm not saying that I'm the only one with these ideas. No, that's not the case. But whether it's connected to the next level or not, some might say it's connected to God, or some higher source, or space aliens, or humans, or it's even CGI, of course. That's all the different things staged, like a hoax. So all those things are options, of course, to think about all these things. But when you see a certain amount of things that are very different each time from one another, and humans don't have that kind of imagination. They've got the imagination on some things, but now when it comes to what the possibilities of what things can do in outer space, that's why they're so infrequent. If it was humans doing it, you would see it happening more, because they wouldn't be able to hold back. Once they were tricking the public, I think they would continue to do it. They do that with misinformation all the time. But when so I guess I can't really prove this point, but it's just the way I feel about it. So that doesn't mean I believe everything I see, but I kind of link things together with the fact that they're having to do with the moon and the planets. I've said this many times. I know it's kind of boring to hear it again, but with Jesus saying that the signs would be in the sun and the moon and the stars, and I count stars as including planets and comets because they look like stars to us, even though a comet is a star that's strewn through the environment, so it's moving faster from our perspective. And it's leaving a tail, and that's what Jesus said. Lightning would be shining from, here to there, or east to west. I think it was said in two places, in Luke and I think Matthew. And east to west just happens to be the ecliptic, and that's what we see a lot of things from the ecliptic angle. From east to west. And supposedly we're supposed to be able to see with the naked eye Atlas if it continues to grow like this. Now, I don't know how far away it is, how fast it's moving, and the next level could slow it down if they wanted to, or speed it up. It may be Doe's craft. Atlas had the whole world on his shoulders, right? And there's no humans that have that, and there's no space aliens that have that. They have influence over the world. The planet itself, they don't have much influence over, except for allowing it to get polluted to death, and messing up with the electromagnetism of but I don't even think they changed electromagnetism enough to affect the poles. I doubt that, because I think there's a certain amount of things. Well, I know there's a certain amount of things that the next level isn't going to let them do if they don't want to deal with the ramifications of it. But if they can easily, fix it, then I guess anything's game if they can figure out how to do it. But I know that from T and Doe's minds that they restrict them. They restrict the humans, and they restrict. And how do I know that? Well, I'll give you an example. They felt like when we're in different locations, we get different medicine. Okay? And they said that you can actually feel the difference when you go state to state, because there's a different vibration, because all the people that were ever living in that state from however many years we're talking about, I guess 200, 300 years, whatever it is, in that area that becomes known as the state, many times they think of themselves as with not a national, but a state kind of consciousness. They have pride in their state sometimes, and sometimes they don't like their state, or whatever they experience. And so that actually is like it sets up a vibration that I believe the next level can read, because T and Doe said that we can feel it, and that's why they felt like being west of the Mississippi, that's where they felt like most connected to the next level, to their older members. The clearest connection. And they would take trips, even like as far away as New York and maybe further than that, and into Canada. I think a time. Well, I know they went into Canada during the beginning of their time. I don't know if they went back to Canada. We went back to Canada in 1994. It was my group that went up there. Maybe some of the other groups did too. I think maybe they did, and I didn't know about it. But the list is in the Heaven's Gate book. But so, but the other thing to holding the idea that they were holding things back. I got to make sure I write that down. Well, they said it directly in the 80s. I remember T was present when they talked about how we needed to get out of the way, get this task done, so that other things could happen in the human kingdom. Because the whole kingdom is a school, but doesn't mean everybody's in the school. I mean, everybody's in the school whether they like it or not, but it doesn't mean that everybody is advancing in grades or staying stagnant in grades or going back maybe in grades. I think all options exist. And I didn't hear them talk about the three different. I know they talked about stagnation and going forward, of course. And I think from other things they've said, I think it's fair to believe that people can go backwards. Because the first 6 grades were getting into the human kingdom, and the second 6 grades, from the next level's point of view, T&O's point of view, is getting out of what you get into. So everything is game. You could become a sex worker. You could become a scientist. A politician, a leader of many people, corporate business person, whatever it is. It doesn't make any. A family, raising families. All those things present humans with lessons in life. We have health lessons. We have lessons in relationships with one another. We have lessons with having to curb our anger and have patience and tolerance and not becoming non-judgmental and trying to be fair when we're trying to work things out with all the people that have an interest in the outcome. And Lucifer likes that too. I mean, I'm not saying that the next level. The next level is promoting all those good behaviors, but Lucifer has some of those good behaviors and likes order, according to T&O. So he and his supporters, whether they're supporting him directly or indirectly, because they have conflict among each other as well, because they're running the leaders of the countries, according to T&O. And so isn't it interesting that one of the first things that Trump did when this really was coming to a head in the United States, even though it was a few just infections or whatever, not infections, they're not infections, they're viruses. I guess they could be considered to be infections. They cause sores, I know that, in the body, or scars in the body, they say, in the lung tissue, which that's what pneumonia does. Anyway, but so that's it's not a unique disease. It's just another strain of many viruses. And since it's a new one, it's triggering people to die from it that have a weakened immune system. And now then the government's capitalizing on it. And some of it's, fear, and some of them also, they recognize that this is going to keep happening because it has been happening over and over again with Ebola and Zika, and whether it's stimulated by the humans or not, whether it's leaked out of the laboratory or not, intentionally or not, whether it's created, coming from the ocean in some way or not, whether it's coming from lab animals that were injected with things being sold or released to the public to eat, or have relationships with, as pets, for all I know. I don't know, I haven't heard that part of it, but or not. It doesn't really matter. We're in the fix, and it's because the next level wanted it to happen, because they want us to be put to the test on where we're going to show our allegiance, to the next level or to the human kingdom. So if we think that the humans can fix this, they can fix any aspect of it, they're not going to get a fix that isn't with a lot more complications. They may fix aspects of it, okay? They may have kept it down enough to where it's not spreading so fast. But in some areas, it may be still, like New York City, it may still be spreading. They say 1 in 1,000. They believe are positive. Now, I don't know if they've tested 1 in 1,000, so I don't know why they're saying that. But because what I last heard was they still don't have enough tests. So where does that come from? 1 in 1,000. Because there's a lot of people, in the medical industry, and it is an industry, that are, for various reasons, wanting to keep the attention on this, because they think it's going to come back again. And they're right. It is going to come back again, probably. I think it's going to come back again, in addition to additional calamities. If you want to call them plagues, they're plagues. It doesn't have to kill tens of thousands of people. It might might be tens of thousands. There have been plagues and droughts that were killing tens of thousands in Africa when I was growing up, and Biafra, I remember, where so many people were dying because of famine and disease. But it wasn't in the United States, and it didn't affect Europe in a big way. But now, since it's affecting Europe in a big way, Trump goes to the governors right after this came to the fore, the governors of the United States, and then he went and he met with the G7. Now, and the G7, I believe, are evidence of being the 7 heads of the beast, also the 7 space aliens, or 7 space alien races might be represented by those 7 space aliens, because they could be from different planets originally. Who knows how many civilizations ago? Maybe the last civilization. I don't know. Doe indicated that, but he didn't say, what civilization they were from. But he says the next level drew a number of individuals that needed to go through the new lesson program, so that they wouldn't repeat the fall and going against the next level that happened with the ones called Lucifer and his associates, or those that followed him to become dropouts that went against the next level. Big difference between dropouts that are trying to sort things out, dropouts that are critical of T and O in some way, and dropouts that are publicly talking about T and O as not being who they are. But even that, it's up to the next level how to offer them more opportunities to see the truth. The next level doesn't hide the truth from us, but they give it to us direct right from the beginning of the experiment. That what's required to become a member of the next level is giving all your love, all your heart, all your mind, all your soul to the next level through the older members, Jehovah and Moses. Now, they didn't talk in those terms then, but I mean, to them, the talk that Moses was bringing to them was unusual, I'm sure. I mean, because to have someone among them that was saying that they were in contact with the guy that created the planet, known as the Elohim, the judges, the supreme judges of all of us, and they are the supreme judges. That's what Elohim means. That's one of the definitions. Magistrates, they're the rulers of the earth. So Atlas isn't Luciferian or space alien, like I believe I said. I believe that's accurate. And it's Do. He's got the weight of the planet on his shoulders. When he was here by himself, that was the case. And that was his burden, his task, given to him by T. When T was here, they had the burden of the planet and everything on it on both their shoulders. And I don't know if T had most of it. I think that may be the way it works, because of all the things that T put into motion, actually. That even if humans didn't know about it, and the space aliens didn't even, well, some of the space aliens could have known about it. Because Tindo said that they know how the garden grows. And so they always produce a facsimile, which I think one facsimile was the two beings that showed up, or two entities, or two holograms that showed up for Joseph Smith in New York and Vermont. Is that an interesting coincidence that New York is in this again, right from the beginning of the facsimile promotion? I mean, look at New York. Pretty much the real capital of the United States, with its Wall Street, the investment bankers. It's the leader of the G7 with the United Nations there. So it's the seat of the beast. Now Washington, it's New York and Washington D.C. of course. It's a dual seat, not only that, but I think Los Angeles is in there as well, and Chicago, maybe. I mean, you can. You probably actually. What comes to mind right now is you could probably pick 7 cities, and you would probably see. But that's I don't really care to try. I did try to do that at one point, and it doesn't. It's neither here nor there because it doesn't make any difference whether that corresponds exactly with prophecy or not. But it's just the way it is. But I guess that would include the cities that I'm talking about it still, right? Even though I said it's neither here nor there, but I was thinking of the cities where Tiendo spent the most time, and that's the Denver area, Dallas, Texas area, Los Angeles, the suburbs of Phoenix, the suburbs of Albuquerque, that included Santa Fe, did a little bit of time in Atlanta, and no time in New York, except for a visit. I think someone tried to do one of the groups tried to do a meeting in New York, but it didn't come together. I know I went through New York with my group, but I think Doe wanted us to go to New Hampshire to hold a meeting, so that we bypassed New York. Anyway, and so New York was when 9/11 happened. I felt like that was like apocalypse thinking, and I wasn't into the Bible. I mean, I had gone through a lot of it in the 90s in the classroom, because that's when Doe introduced us to exploring things at our own volition. He didn't tell us what to do in that regard, but he bought a whole bunch of Bibles for us, Companion and Dakes, and that's when we got the Strong's Concordance, and there was another one that was an excellent one. I forgot the name of it though, because it had a lot of references in it. So you had different translations of different words, which the only way you get that is by going to Strong's Concordance. So it was nice to see that, like in the column there, so you could read it and see different ideas, different ways of, and it made it more generic. That's what Tiendo called it, generic terminology, as opposed to religious terminology. Because the religious terminology, it was like swallowing well, I don't know how to compare it exactly, but it's like eating something with a bad taste. Because it's like you think of it as being related to the Christians or the Jews or the Muslims, and then you see all their bad behaviors, and yet they're talking about this as, this is God and all that, and God is good and love and all that. And you see the people that are talking about that, crucifying people and burning people at the stake and Salem witch trials and all that by the ones that were so-called the Puritans, the ones that were pure. I believe it was Jesus, and Doe also said that, which was the one and the same, that people that would kill you based on thinking that they were doing so for God. And that may be yet ahead for some of us. I don't know. But I'm certainly not looking forward to it, and I certainly don't want to force it to happen before it's time. But I'd rather go that way than buy some disease that to where I can't talk, or to try to kind of help us sort through all that's happening, regardless of how much I get accurate or not, and also and related to prophecy. I think it's very important that I relate it to prophecy and what Jesus said. Even if it's just for the sake of one person that could be a staunch Christian that catches on to it and thinks, I wonder if that's true. And that doesn't mean that I got to be the one to do it. No, the next level can help them in a lot of ways, but this can be one of them. And that's one of the positives that comes out of all these negatives that the humans are sowing in terms of this crisis that's been formulated, developed. I'm not saying that it was planned ahead, but it might have been. It might have been, because there's a lot of evidence, and David Icke has some evidence of that, and I don't think he's necessarily wrong about, because Tiendo said that space aliens are controlled in their agenda, and they're controlling the humans that have the most influence over humans, and their number one agenda, well, I don't know if it's their number one agenda, but the first one that Doe mentioned was that they want to get off the planet, because the way he said it was that rumor has it that they're going to be recycled. So among themselves, they have the see because why don't they know, right, that it's going to happen if they know the way the garden grows? Well, the next level always changes things so that what they do can be shown to be human-based, mammalian, human equivalents, where Tiendo called them. And like, for instance, they're trying to manufacture vehicles, grow them. They're trying to grow human vehicles. Call it cloning, call it test tube babies. And Tiendo weren't against test tube babies. They actually thought it was kind of a good thing to do, to not be doing, propagating with the fires of sexuality, because that's not behavior in the next level. The next level, they don't reproduce like animals. It's a part of the evolution of the species. And it's a mind evolution. And it's directed, but we have to direct it based on instructions that we get from the next level of our own evolution. And that's a big choice every step of the way. Hello, DJ Taconic. So so that there's more people thinking about, moving to the mountains and farming, not thinking that the government's going to bail them out of their problems or stop the disease or even have a, not going to trust what they provide and there's going to be a penalty, or no, I shouldn't say a penalty, I should say a challenge. There's a challenge to not going along with the government, everything the government wants us to do. I believe T and O would have us go along with everything the government wants us to do, rather than to be thrown into jail or killed. But I'm not going to say everything isn't the right word there. But the object is for us to have the ultimate amount of time and opportunity and energy to forward our development towards membership in the next level by overcoming our humanness and ceasing to be afraid of standing up for T and O to whatever degree we're afraid of that, and that's natural to have that. I was afraid of it when, after T and O gave me the wake up, which required them giving me a lot of mind help to where my vehicle didn't question it, and I didn't have any doubts. That was provided help for me to do that. My vehicle by itself, with the mind that was in the vehicle at the time, and even with the soul that was associated with that vehicle, up until that point, didn't have that much consciousness. Well, I kind of knew what wasn't working, and T and Do said that that's sometimes a sign of that's what the growth is, of knowing what doesn't work. And that's in thinking or in behavior. So like somebody that has conquered drug addiction, or conquered it enough to where they're not, dying before their time, or bringing abuse upon themselves and other people. Well, I just had a thought, and it just knocked my train of thought away. Right, so we have maximum time for that, and we don't need to fear that or any of it, because if we're looking to the next level for help with our fears. So as the fears surface in us and we realize that we're feeling fearful, doubts are overcoming us for the moment, and so we just want to escape from the information for a while, or whatever, from T and O. We just have to go do something. That's all part of the process. That's not a negative. It's a negative. It becomes a negative if we just don't pay it any mind anymore. But then the next level has ways of helping us see it again. And they give us the help just like they gave me the help. They give everybody now the help to come back to it and keep on moving on. with learning everything they taught, and adopting to the degree that we want to their behaviors and ways, and that will all cause us to separate from the human kingdom. It might include being in different places where we're not exposed to the same old things that being with certain people exposes us to. That can kind of happen naturally, in a sense. That happened naturally for me. I let it happen. I didn't fight it. When my partner, had been looking for somebody else, and because I was getting more and more into writing the book, and it was almost impossible for me to get anything done. So when she left, that's when I really started to build it into something. I'm sure the next level was in charge of that. And it's not like they were manipulating her or her new partner. They were giving them what they both wanted also. That's the way the next level does it. Because it's hard to be around us, individuals that believe 100% in what T and Do are teaching, or even a major percent of, because it's challenging for people that aren't ready for that, even though I'm not judging anybody as being ready for it as lesser. They're not. Because it's up to the next level to judge what people are ready for and what they're not ready for. And they can be overcoming sexuality, for instance, or gender consciousness, or better than I do. And they might come into believing in the next level of information at a later time. Sometimes being too close to it can be too much medicine. And T and Do taught that by their taking trips away from us. They said that so things could happen differently, so the next level could work with us in a different way. They sometimes took trips. And even though they probably had other things that they accomplished during those trips, of getting, the next steps on how to help us. And they said that happened too. And then, and they also said that regarding like the state consciousness, that when we were in Utah, the medicine was very strong. Now, we weren't in Utah very long. So I don't think it's an accident that there was just an earthquake that was 5.7, I think, in just 10 miles southwest of, or southwest of Salt Lake City. Because that's also a seat of the beast, even though T and Do never had us spend any time there. Well, we did spend time in the mountains, in the Wasatch Mountains, I think it was. West of Salt Lake City, right outside of Tooele, where they have a ammunition military training ground there for shooting off cannons and bombs and stuff. Because we used to hear them when we were camping up in the mountains there. we'd hear their test explosions. And so actually, that happened. That earthquake happened towards that area, in that direction from Salt Lake City. Not exactly, but relatively speaking. I don't know if that's related to it or not, but what they said is that when we were considering moving someplace with just dough, he actually brought it to us in the classroom and said he's been thinking about where to move to, and he wanted to run it by us to see if we had any thoughts. And when he would do that, occasionally he would say sometimes, "Now this isn't a setup for you to just say, what do you think? I want to actually hear if you have any thoughts about it." And I don't know if anybody brought up Utah. I don't know how it came up, but that's when he explained to us that when he and T were here in Utah, he felt like the medicine was very strong and they didn't want to stay there very long. There. And by medicine being very strong, that could have meant a number of things. Because medicine, like with doubts about who T and Do are, that's medicine. Because doubts are medicine. It's a challenge to overcome them. But it's part of the task of taking over a vehicle to block them. Put up a blank card. And what I do when I feel those doubts happening, which I felt a lot more, I haven't felt in a long time, but I felt a lot more in when I was coming back into wanting to be of service again. And so I started to pay attention to do some searches for Heaven's Gate on the internet in around 2002 or 3 or 1. No, it was probably closer to 2. Yeah, it was definitely 2 when I moved out of New York. I would watch some of those exit videos during the last chance to evacuate Earth, and and of course the exit videos and the I forgot the name of the final, another video that Do made in the end there that I would actually, do I have that on transcribed? I don't read those as often as I need to, because I always gain a whole lot when I read them, and so I'll have to go back and do that. But anyway, so doubts, dealing with putting up a blank card, and changing your mind into thinking about something else, and doing something even physically can help with that. But I know what I was talking about. That when I would watch those videos, I would feel like cringing a little bit in my vibration. Sometimes though, I'd watch the video for a certain amount of time, and I knew that my vehicle was feeling this sense of this was bizarre. Though it looked bizarre, because I never saw him look that thin, and I did see him with a shaved head. But that thin, and that, in the Beyond Human series, he had a bunch of hair, and that forceful, that powerful. He was definitely he was setting the rules down. He was telling the truth to the whole human kingdom, the whole Earth's population. He was setting them straight on who he was and why he was here and that he was leaving and what the rules were for the three categories of people that could go with him. And that was hard to take. That was hard for me to hear all that because the soul that was with this vehicle backed off. Tiendo taught that's what happens. Backed off from the vehicle when the vehicle started doing human behaviors of sexuality. Because that's animal behavior. And they don't have that animal behavior in the next level. They don't even have the plumbing for it. And they don't desire it. If we didn't overcome it before we left enough, then a part of our mind that would be in the new vehicle would have a desire for that. And that kind of desire for something in the human kingdom could result in us not following instructions on a task. Like, let's say we were given the task to go to a planet and observe and report different parts of the planet, what was happening with the humans that were living on it, or the animals, or whatever it is. And so all of a sudden then we start thinking, let's say, well, they might not think it consciously, but they might think, they're having a problem down there. Maybe we can help them. Maybe they were having a problem with their health. So they thought, we know a lot about health because that's how the garden grows. I mean, that's part of the things that are taught by the next level to the humans in different civilizations in different planets even. And they would have had that information in their souls if they were of some equivalence to the fallen angels or were the same individuals with new vehicles, because their original vehicles died that the next level provided them with to do those tasks on a next level spacecraft that the next level provided them with. But they didn't have to know how to pilot. So anyway, so they could have went down then with their spacecraft, even the spacecraft looking like a cloud, and they could have got close to the ground, and their vehicles could have been ones that could float down to the planet's surface and not be seen by the humans, or maybe they had vehicles that could change their vibrations so they could be seen by the humans. And the humans that would see them would think, oh my gosh, what is this? And so basically they would be like so overwhelmed by whatever, even if they looked just like other humans. Their vibration and their mind would be greater than the humans had. And so they would be seen as, okay, they could have been fell in love with, easily. And so they started, I don't know if they actually made it or they had the facility to put babies together through test tubes, or if they got the humans to mate, and then they influence them going forward to believe in them as their lords, as their teachers, as their gods, as their and so then started to teach them like herbal arts, for instance, herbal healing, which you could say, well, why would the next level be against them doing that? But the next level is designing this as a school. They don't want the humans on it at any given point to have too much self-dependence, self-reliance on themselves and the things that they have access to on the earth. Because then they won't seek the next level's help for their problems. That's the way I think about it. Now, I don't know if that's the way Tiendo think about it. But I do know that the next level holds things back, which is what I was starting to talk about in the very beginning of this live stream. And Tiendo talked about that to where they only got percentages of the steps. And sometimes they got a step, that all humans don't have souls, was like a lesson step. And I didn't have a big problem with that, but it was a little bit challenging at first. I remember wondering about it a lot, and it was like confusing to me to think about that way. Because I was working with humans in, people that were outside the classroom in Amarillo, Texas, when that was said. And so, it was just weird. I didn't treat anybody any differently, and I didn't think they were lesser because of it, but in a sense, I knew they were on a different rung on the ladder than I was being given the opportunity to climb up onto. Doesn't mean I was on that next rung on the ladder. It means I was making application to get on that next rung on the ladder. I was being pulled up because the next level helps us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do it. The Luciferians would overcome us. They have that much control. Look at all the people that don't even think the next level exists. Which they're associating with the breakdown of the religions as the next level not existing. The creators of this planet, that this planet came about by accident, by random development, as if that's a form of development that we can see really going very far. I mean, sure, you can mutate a cell. I guess you could. I don't know if they can ever do anything that's really random, totally. I mean, even the random number generators on computers have their limitations. Well, I guess the limitation would be the chip the size of the chip and the memory that would go into holding the data that represents the next iteration of randomness. And then that can only happen for the length of life of that computer, and while that computer has electricity. So it's not truly random, from a philosophical perspective. But like Doe said, that he can't imagine that somebody that could see inside of a human vehicle and not be like taken with wonderment on how that all was brought to be. And knowing that there was intelligence beyond anything humans have, way beyond anything humans have. Humans barely can work with them, with the organs. They can patch them up. They can take them out of one person and put them in another, in many cases, but not without a lot of problems with that person. Well, maybe not for a while, or maybe they can keep those problems at bay for a while with drugs. And that's all good. There's nothing wrong with any of that. That's all, that's all part of the human kingdom to do those things. But it's also depending on themselves. And so it's not fostering a relationship that would be considered moving towards graduation from the human kingdom eventually. It's unless they change. And some do. Some do, but they're still in that department. They're recognizing that, yes, there's a higher intelligence that created all this, but this is my job and I'm really interested in it and I'm going to keep on doing it. So it's not like they're bad for doing that. We don't have the judgment of that kind of thing. Everybody's on the same rung on the ladder, but we all have different amounts of reaching up to the next level's rung in different ways at different times. But yet the people that are exposed to T&O's information are on the spot to do more, to grow more. Because that's what overcoming the planet's influence on us is. And that's by following everything. So they gave us the whole picture. They even showed us what the previous classroom was, and they told us in the Heaven's Gate book that that classroom isn't offered anymore. So if that classroom's not offered anymore, then what is the next classroom? And that's exactly what we have now. Whether somebody knows about what I'm talking about or not. And that is because the Heaven's Gate name is being passed around year round now through music videos and Lily Uzi Vert and others long ago. I forgot the names of some of the bands and that were putting little clips of Doe talking in them. And there's new bands, the new wave bands that are doing it. And I think that's going to keep on escalating because, it's just, that was the impression that was made on the planet. Especially when people find out, start to think, well, maybe it's true. And that can blow them away, and that doesn't mean that they're going to change into a believer, but even having that thought is something that the Luciferians don't want us to have. Okay, Milquest Toast, eugenicist, says, T declared the harvest complete sometime in the 80s. No? Yes, she did. But that wasn't the end of the harvest because Doe had us go out after T left her vehicle and talk to the public in 1994. And we got some new members. We almost doubled our numbers when we did that. And I was there then, so I can say we. And then Doe said in the Final Exit video, that's the name of it, right? Final Exit. And maybe Last Chance also, he referred to it at least Last Chance, he talked about it, that there were 3 types of people that would go with him. Now, anybody that goes with him when he leaves the planet, entirely with his crew and everything, and all the souls and spirits that they want to save from the recycling, however they do that, that's all the harvest. But there's stages to the harvest. And so the ones that were in line to actually graduate, to become, to get next level vehicles and significant service, is the way Doe said it, they were the ones that were among him in the classroom, the 38 plus, I believe, the 4. Even though some of those individuals, Doe said, would have to come back for another experience in the human kingdom to finish their overcoming. Because even laying down their life wasn't the ultimate, well, it is an ultimate, it's not the only ultimate lesson that we need to learn. Being willing to lose our life for, like Jesus said, the greatest love the shepherd has for his sheep is to lay down his life for the sheep and protect them from the wolf. So the wolf might end up attacking the shepherd or the pack of wolves. That's what the case is now with the Luciferian space aliens, fallen angel souls, with their hybridized human vehicles, human equivalent vehicles. So Milk Twist then says Milk Q Toast. Milk Q Toast. I don't know how to say that, but that's all right. So there are multiple harvests. Multiple stages of harvest. I would put it that way. I think there's 2. But I don't know that I can't say that as an absolute truth, because I can't remember Doe saying that. But it's in the book of Revelations in chapter 14 that it depicts two harvests. And the second one, the first one is where a spacecraft comes with a T on it, I believe. And the second one is it describes it as the blood is going to be rising up to the bridle of the horses. In other words, it's the wine press. They compare it to a wine press. The wine are the individuals that are in the process of being fermented, metamorphosized into their next step up towards the rung on the ladder. That's the next level. Or maybe the next level, it could be thought of as more than one rung on the ladder. I'm using that analogy, but which I don't know. I think T and O did refer to Jacob's ladder at one point, but I don't remember what they said about it. But that's not the reason I'm using that terminology. It just occurred to me that way. Well, T and O would say for the ones that are coming up. And they always talked about the ones that were coming up as being connected to the same strain as their student body, strain of humans. So that different ones would relate differently to different students. Not if they had the chance to relate to them. And I've had people tell me that, they just feel something when they look at Junodi or, maybe Destody or, different individuals. And and so they may be actually tuning into that they're on that strain of humans, that branch or that vine that's coming off of the next level's tree of life. That's the tree of life, as opposed to the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which is the earth tree. It's the human genetic tree. But genetics is also has to do with mind development. Spirit and mind are synonymous, according to T and Do. So then Milky Toast Eugenesis says, oh, I see, so there are stages to it, yes. And then it says milk toast. Oh, milk toast. Oh, yeah, milk with a Q. I'm very dull in that department of linguistics. Doe, I think, would appreciate it. I'm not, I don't know if anything I said, I hope I didn't make you feel like you said something wrong or something, because there's nothing to be sorry about that I'm aware of. So, okay, cool. All right. It looks like I'm looking down, right? I mean, not looking right at the camera because I'm talking to the chat room. It's to the right, bottom right of my screen. Then Milk Toast says, I'm glad that Doe would approve. I don't know that Doe would approve. Now that's a good opportunity for me to state that I don't. If I say that I think Doe might like that, I really mean might in big letters. And I don't know. I mean, I had a reason for saying that. I didn't just say it, as like some kind of stock thing I say to people. I don't do that. I try not to do that. If I ever do that, I hope I become aware of it and stop doing it. Like trying to act like I can know what Doe would say. I can't know what Doe would say to it unless he's here with me, physically in a vehicle. I mean, I can know for myself. I can feel I know for myself, but I don't know it to a degree to where I would tell somebody else that I know it. Like I had a bunch of dreams with Doe in them, and I feel like that was Doe in those dreams, and but I can't prove that to anybody else, and so I could be wrong in that regard because he wasn't here with me 100%. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to pay attention to what he said in those dreams, especially when sometimes they seem to refer to my lessons. And Milk Toast says, I understand you don't speak for him. He spoke plenty for himself. Yes, he did. And I can't add to what he did, what he said. But I can bring out the ramifications of the many things he said that because when the next level communicates, they're communicating in thought packets. That's not the word they use, I don't think, but chunks, I think they said, and ideas, they also said, and that they would, when they would get an idea, they would get the same idea together, even though at different times, while they were doing different things in the house or campground, wherever they were, and they would come together and talk about the ideas they were having, and they would find that they had the same idea at the same time, and then they would start to pull on that idea. That's the way they described it. We would pull on it, and and uh, and as they pulled on it, they would work with one another on what they felt like they were getting from it, greater understandings, how it applied to the students, how it applied to the world, how it might have applied to new information about the space alien, whatever it was. They would pull on it, and they wouldn't necessarily tell us about it right away. It depended on whether they felt like they got enough to where they were ready to give us a next step. And that's what happened with the Black Hawk meetings that are on tape, and other meetings too. But that one, I zeroed into that one because it really had good sound. And I always thought of Black Hawk as being a very special place because Tiendo had a retreat there, and the student body had visits. And I visited, I think, 2 or 3 times during the course of a bunch of months. Got to be in a more intimate relationship with Tiendo because they were living in that craft with 6 students that were taking care of all the craft needs, paying the bills, and going on supply runs, and so that Tiendo could focus on. And so there was always something special about being there with Tiendo. I mean, it was tremendously special. You felt like you were in a temple. I mean, that's what I felt. I don't mean a temple in church, but in a sense, a temple in church, because even in a temple in church, whatever you want to call it, synagogue or a church or but I mean the churches that were built, big with all that space in them, though he recognized the ambiance, or not the ambiance, the way that people would like to go to those places to feel close to God. That was their own way of doing it. He wasn't, because Tiendo took us to church. That Christmas, I think, before T left her vehicle, or maybe before that, they took us to church, I think in Houston, and maybe someplace else, like I think I remember Houston being taken to church. That's not where we lived when we were in retreat when they lived in Houston for brief. And we also lived in Houston a little bit. But, and Doe said about it. And when we went, the whole classroom went, and Tiendo went with us and sat with us. And we didn't say anything to anybody. Not that I was aware of. I mean, we didn't have any instructions to talk to anybody. I mean, not that we couldn't have, polite exchanges with people. We could. And they didn't, tell us we can't talk to anybody. They said the task wasn't to try to talk to somebody, or lay anything on them. Because that wasn't we weren't looking for new students. They didn't want more students than were part of their task, because they were preparing positions for us. No, they were preparing us for positions, jobs, replacing even the ones that were the ones that fell in their tasks, and perhaps other tasks. because we would have a choice of what tasks, what departments to go into once we became members of the next level. Wow. So Jay Pollock, hi. Let's see, you're saying you met Doe in 75, likely knowing him better than anyone around, I think. Well, that's not necessarily, well, having more experience, uh, yeah, I guess so. Because I was one of the last ones to drop out from those that met him in 1975. I mean, Riccoti dropped out. He met him in 1975. Theoretically, that doesn't make any difference. I met him some months before that. But see, that wouldn't make any difference. But the more experience we have with them and their information, that's what is of value. So that we could be in the classroom for many years and get very little done with our overcoming. Because we didn't know even that we weren't putting our total effort into certain degrees of overcoming. Like several of the individuals that dropped out that are, one of which I believe is still in his vehicle, and another one I suspect is still in his vehicle, but I don't know. Some of the others were in a classroom for almost as long as I was, and yet I learned from them that they were thinking about things in a totally different way than the way I was thinking about them. And I think I was thinking about them closer to the way that Doe was thinking about them. I may be wrong about that because Doe didn't tell me that. But like one individual I met with in 1995, and then also in 1999 or 2000, 2001 maybe even, 2002 maybe even. Anyway, and I remember asking him what he thought about that period of time when we started fasting on air. We were living in trailers and tents in the desert west of Phoenix, north of Yuma, way north of Yuma. And we had just sold everything we had in the 3 or 4 houses that we had, but we hadn't sold everything. And so when we started that fast, I remember thinking that maybe I remember one time, well, we fasted on air for one day, and then the next day, Doe added water to our diet. That's to our fast. And so for the next 12 days, I believe it was, we just fasted on water only. We could drink as much as we wanted. But because of that, my energy level was next to nothing. Yet we still were doing tasks. We still went to the flea market with the remaining things that we had to sell from the houses we lived in, a bunch of paintings and things that decorated the house, the craft, as we called it, that made the craft look normal to a human that would come into it. We didn't have anything that made it look like, it was a spacecraft. We knew it wasn't a spacecraft, but we knew it could have been inside of a spacecraft, the next level, and could have also was serving as our facsimile, not facsimile, but our model of a spacecraft in order for us to be thinking in those terms, because that's what we were going to be going to with our minds. So it was preparation. But so to get back to that example, so I remember getting into my top bunk in a trailer. Because we had a few big trailers, and then we had some pop-ups. And then we had some big tents for like meetings. No, we had a big a trailer that the door, the sides opened up so that we barely could fit. I mean, we really were stuffed in that trailer because there were somewhere in the 30s, I think, at that point, numbers of us. Maybe not. Maybe it was far less than that. Maybe it was just in the high 20s at that point. But so I remember, that was kind of hard to walk. I mean, it just felt like an effort to walk. And but I could do, things. And we loaded the truck and took it to Phoenix and went to a flea market and unloaded it and put things out and talked with the people and just drinking water. So, but then I remember when I crawled into my bunk or climbed into my bunk, that was on the second bunk in the trailer. I remember kind of like curling up and thinking, I wonder if I'm going to leave my vehicle like this. I wonder if this is the way we're going to exit. Which would be a type of suicide, right? Like, starving your vehicle to death. And I remember thinking, okay, well, so be it. That was after the Cocoon movie where I was thinking about, like I talked about in the last live stream, of whether we would take that yacht that Doe bought and we never used. And if the spacecraft didn't pick us up, if we took it out, that maybe we would, drown. And how, I wasn't looking forward to that, but I was willing to do it if that was the way we were going to exit. And so that was like the fasting in the desert. Well, no, the Cocoon movie, I think, came about right after T left her vehicle. Because I got the feeling that, thinking about it that way, that T, helped that happen to show us a bunch of things about next level members. They were, they looked like they were like made out of white light, but they were physical. They if you look at, and they looked a little bit like the way T and Doe depicted while T was in her vehicle of the older members looking, which, I put on my screen many times. A refined looking individual with a slightly larger head and a small slit for a mouth and just holes for ears and a little nose that's functional. So very, very gentle features. Not like, they're depicted with those big eyes that T and Doe thought were suits. And even one of the space aliens told that to Rael. That's why I can kind of get a sense that Rael was telling the truth, that he was contacted and even potentially abducted by space aliens to make him into a leader. The other thing that the space aliens want to do, as well as get off the planet, was to turn people's eyes away from what they believe is another space race that just has better technology than they do. They don't recognize that they're evolutionarily above them, because they lost that recognition, even though they would have had it when they graduated into the next level. And Tita said that the bar was raised for them. So now there's people talking about how Trump's talking about how he doesn't think that everybody in the country needs to be locked down. I mean, not that everybody is, but people are moving in that direction now. Virginia, I think, is going to start implementing it. Maybe Florida has done it already. You know, and I don't doubt that that's going to keep on expanding, but in each of those states, there's plenty of people that aren't really being affected at all. I mean, by the millions of people that aren't being affected by this. And I know the fear is that it's going to infect everybody, but that's not the evidence of what China's experiencing. Even though they said that they went backwards in Hong Kong. They thought they were done with it. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to pass in terms of being a health crisis to the degree that they're claiming it is, and it's been exaggerated. But it doesn't mean that a lot of people won't die and that it won't come back, and a lot of people more will die because of it, or another strain. So I'm not saying that it's not good to have social distancing and all that, even though I was resistant to it, like a lot of us are. I'm recognizing that it's got a value for the next level, to where people have more time on their hands and they still have the internet, so they can search for the truth, and they can see the politics that's in it as well, because the politics is very in it. Where they sent the money at first was to the $3 billion to the CDC, $3 billion to the pharmaceutical industry to develop vaccinations. And they already had a vaccination for it, but it went to trial. And they can fast track it if they want to. And I'm not saying that they won't fast track it. I think they will. And then they might even require it, like Romney is talking about. I think he's the one that's talking about it. But no, Bill Gates is talking about having a new identity that identifies the people that have the coronavirus or not. Or maybe the people that are inoculated with it, with the vaccine, because he's big on that. And he's part of the global health initiative, or what do we call it, the global health something. That's part of a number of organizations, the WHO, of course, the World Health Organization, and a number of global health organizations. So his meeting with the G7 wasn't an accident. He was touching base with the world order, the new world order, and that's what it is. The G7 and the G10 and the G20, they're all different degrees of that new world order. with the G7 trying to run it all. But they can't run it all because China isn't a part of the G7. And Russia isn't either. And Russia was thrown out of the G10. No, he was thrown out of the G7, right? Because of what they did in Ukraine, in the Crimea province of Ukraine, that started that proxy war with the United States. Same as it was Afghanistan was a proxy war with the United States. So they may restrict travel for a long time, using this as an excuse. And so maybe, so that $2 trillion, a big chunk of it's going to go to the airline industry. And I'm not saying that it's not good, but I hope it trickles down to the stewardesses and pilots and, the people that are losing their jobs because they're going to continue to restrict travel. I don't know if they are. They might want to resume everything the way it was. I think that's what Trump wants, and I don't think that's a bad thing because it gives people, a big jolt, and then all the information becomes available on all the corruption involved in that, the government's response to it, and even the health community's response to it, not teaching to build up your immune system to fight it. That's what they should be using billions to teach everybody in all the schools and how to have a diet that will build up your immune system so that you can fight off any disease or most any disease, potentially. And that's what D&O taught with the Transfiguration diet that I was a part of. I was a guinea pig for. It says it's a Transfiguration diet. It's an extraordinarily advanced turnaround, in quotes, concept regarding man and food, health, an exclamation point, or disease, exclamation point. And it says Little Green Ink's think tank. Isn't it interesting that the Green New Deal and also includes healthier food, even though they don't talk about eating healthier, they talk about healthier food. There's a big difference there, big difference. And how much healthier? Are they going to take control over the agribusinesses and start growing with, permaculture methods so that, they're rotating crops and they're leaving ground fallow and they're planting things in ways to where they can keep the pests away, using organic seeds so that the seed isn't full of genetic mutations from the pesticides and things, and the genetic engineering. Then it says also in the Transfiguration Diet book, it says your genetic characteristics can be reprogrammed. And can is underlined, and reprogrammed is in quote marks. The genetic characteristics can be reprogrammed. This is, I believe, one of the best or the best explanation for and program, because it has, things to eat in here. And when and every supplements, cayenne pepper, a lot of raw garlic infused into olive oil, so it's easy to handle, and natural antibiotic, and herbal teas and herbs and vegetables and fruit, raw and cooked. But vegetables very lightly cooked, except like potatoes, they're cooked enough to where they're soft. but vegetables should have a little firmness to them, and like al dente, as they say in the chef world, and only slow cooked grains. So no breads, no flours. But slow cooked grains that are like not heated above like I think 140 degrees, and we had for breakfast sometimes, which are hard to get used to. But I haven't tried to get used to them again. I'm kind of got my routine down, and I'm like everybody else, and I don't change that easily. I shouldn't say everybody else. Some may really adapt to changes easily because they're running ahead of me in that department. Because change is the name of the game. According to T and Do, they would say that a number of times. and take a chance on a positive. And but if in doubt, don't. Those go together, actually. Because taking a chance is having a little bit less doubt. But if somebody doesn't see it as a positive, then there's no chance to take on it. Well, that's really actually, I'd like to erase that. It's just meaningless, I think. Anyway, but New York may be continue to be a hot spot for a while. So people will start leaving, and that's good because maybe they'll go to the mountains and try to grow their own food. Because maybe this is going to be a wake-up call for a lot of people. That's what Jesus said to do. He said, "Go when you see the abomination that makes for desolation," which means that when you see the deceit that makes for waste. In other words, it makes people make choices that can lead them to being recycled. The spirit and the vehicles. I mean, the vehicles are all going to be recycled, of course. I don't know. I can't speak for. There might be some vehicles that the next level might take with them. Still now, but I don't know. I can't think of anything that T and Do said that gives that indication. So I pretty much think that that's not in the cards. But we can't limit our older members. Even if we have something that T and Do said, they could change from that too. Because what's said to us is what works for us. And sometimes there's more depth. Well, there's almost always more depth to the things that they say that we can garner the more we pay attention to their information. So every time we listen to a tape of Do and or T and Do, we're going to get more from it if we want to. If we're listening to it, with a thirsty mind, we're going to always get something more from it. Even the same thing can occur to us, but it occurs to us in a deeper way. Because that's if we're growing. If we're not growing, then if our mind is always on going here and there and going to school or going to a job and being so tired when we get back that we can barely, do anything else, or we don't have any energy for trying to find out what's going on and searching or reading what Tiendo wrote and, um, I'm not the one to decide how much of everything people are gonna, because it's good to have diversions too from uh, um, like a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. So that might mean a music event. I'm saying that. I'm not saying that. Tiendo is saying that. But they took us to music events. We saw an opera. We saw My Fair Lady. I think Doe did My Fair Lady maybe one time, but I didn't see it, of course, because it was before I knew him. And but we went to see My Fair Lady on a stage. We went to movie theaters. We had videos. We had television. We had lots of news. Every day we had the news coming over the wire service on the satellites. We had it. It would just be like the words going across the screen. The same AP thing that people would get in the newsrooms. And you would see, great, different things that you wouldn't. We also listened to the news on the TV sometimes, and on the radio. We had options to listen to the news at times. We didn't have requirements to do all that all the time. Sometimes it was a task to sit down and watch a certain movie that Tiendo were providing on video, or of course go to a movie that they provided. They weren't against pleasure, not at all against pleasure, but they had to be the ones to design our pleasures because they were the teachers and we wanted to be there. I wanted to be there. I didn't want to leave ever until I fell off the wagon, started giving into sexuality with myself, which happened overnight. But there were signs of before that, little signs of, but nothing even close to touching myself or anything. Anyway, I don't want to get into all that right now because I have many times. I don't mind talking about it. I don't like talking about it, but I do like telling the truth. But I wouldn't tell the truth to the government if they close down the border with New York and I want to go to New York and they stop me and say, where are you going? I'm gonna have a story. Well, I could say I'm going to a food store, but I can't say that now after 8 o'clock. But pretty much when I go to New York to play music or something, I leave well before 8 o'clock, so I shouldn't have that problem. I don't think they would care. I mean, it could get to the point to where in some places they've got the National Guard on standby. I've been watching Dabu Nine's videos, and people are sending him pictures of what the military's doing in different places, and how they're just parking under an underpass by a stadium, just hanging out. Maybe they were told that they need to be ready to go into the city and keep people off the street. Question them. Why are you on the street now after a certain time of day? If there's enough soldiers doing that, uh, and they go to certain areas, if somebody comes out of their house and says that, and then comes out again, like when they say I'm going to the food store, they could limit it, like they're doing in England, to one person going out at a time, and that person has to be wearing a mask, like of a family, to get food. They could stop cars. They could have checkpoints all over the place. They could have checkpoints at the food stores. And so they would, and so when the person would come back out, they can make sure that they go back in the same direction. I don't know. I mean, I shouldn't really be trying to say that all, but yeah, I mean, this is definitely medical martial law. I mean, theoretically, they're not supposed to be able to put the military on the streets. That's the Comi Passator. How do you say that? Comi Passatores? No. Comi Pas. Something to do with like a posse. Comi Posse Taurus. Something like that. But I think we lost that right because of the 9/11, because of the Patriot Act, I think. Because they did have military on the streets right after 9/11 in New York City. Because I know I went to Washington Square, and I played music in Washington Square, and there was military around the outside of the square, not everywhere, just in like one spot that I remember. And they weren't stopping anybody that I can remember. I didn't go too close to them. But I played the flute. To me, I was like I was playing it like as like a ceremony in my mind. I went to a special to do that, where I played many times, and I played music in the city many times, in some clubs sometimes, but also on the street and in Grand Central Station and things. But I never was thinking about it as what I was thinking when into 9/11, after the 9/11 thing happened. This was some months after that. But I mean, they weren't allowed to uh, mill around in big groups, I guess. Maybe that was what it was. So now, I mean, how many parts of our Constitution are being uh, removed? And this is angering a lot of people. I'm not telling people to be angry. I'm not angry. I mean, in one way, I'm angry, but I'm not to promote violence or revolution. No, that's wrong for somebody that is aspiring to be a member of the next level in any shape or form. And I've seen people talk about violence. One person referred to that we need a new 1976. No, 1776. We need a new 1776. To me, that's saying we want an armed revolution. Another person said that we need to take them out, talking about the people in Washington. Take them out was his words. I almost said something to him, but I didn't even want to be associated with him saying that in that same comment stream. I started to write a comment, and then I deleted it because I thought, I thought actually T&O, was this something that I should put a comment to? And I ended up feeling like, just delete that comment. You don't need to bring any attention to yourself in that way. I mean, after the 3 Mile Island, there were people that had guns, and they were going to drive over land to get away. I mean, go off the roads, off-road if they had to. Which I can't blame them for, because they didn't tell us the truth about everything that happened at 3 Mile Island. There was a lot of radioactive waste that was released into the environment there. Well, I read about that later. I mean, you can always say that, oh, that's misinformation. They can say everything about everything, right? Everything is misinformation. That's not. We know there was a meltdown and a state, an emergency because of it. Meltdown means that radioactive waste is getting into the groundwater. So Trump's saying that, that he's hoping that this will all be, the lockdowns and all will be over, at least for a lot of people, by Easter. It might not be a accident that he picked Easter. The day before Easter Sunday, in 1997, I was sitting with Just Odie, Just Odie's daughter, and that's where I met her. And what's her name? Newscaster for CBS on a 60 Minutes set in downtown Manhattan. And Leslie Stahl was interviewing us. And the producer of the show, who's died since, was in a compartment that was way up high in this big room that was very open aired. And he shouted down, this is the greatest story since the Reagans. And he said he was going to make it into all 3 segments, which the only time that happened was with the Reagans. But they didn't have time to format it, so they only did it in 2 segments, and they had another segment there in 60 Minutes. But and I was asked, the only thing that I said in that interview that I think was of value was when they asked me, what do you think about the suicides? I forgot what the question was exactly. And I said, that's the wrong word for it. It wasn't suicide. And they asked me then, well, what word would you use for it? I said, I don't know. But it's not suicide. Now, if I had more presence of mind, I would have described suicide as somebody trying to get away from something because they weren't learning the lesson of that item, like they lost their business and so they killed themselves, or they lost their financial, like people would do during the Great Depression and jump off of buildings. And or because they hated their parents or caregivers because they were grounded and they just wanted to get them back, you know, or they um, or some other reason, that was trying to escape a lesson opportunity. Where the members of the students of Tian Do in that 1997, they weren't trying to escape. They were they would have preferred leaving with their vehicles, getting on a spacecraft. But they wanted to go with Do, and Do was leaving. So he didn't force anybody, not at all. In fact, you had to prove to him that you were a sound mind. In other words, you were wanting to leave with him for the right reasons. And the way you prove that to him is by abiding by everything he taught and talking to him about the things that were your struggles and your and any doubts you had, and letting him help you with them. And then if you didn't want to deal with those thoughts, you didn't want to go with those doubts, then to leave the classroom. And several left even at that last in 1995 and 6 and 7, because Rio left just weeks before they all left. But he all along didn't intend to lay down his life, even though he knew about it when he joined. Because I was there when he joined, and though I talked about it twice with us on 2 occasions, even talking about drinking a barbiturate to be the basically putting our vehicles to sleep permanently to their death. He wasn't trying to stay away from that word to make it sound like something else, to trick us, like the Jim Jones thing was a trick. He staged it. He staged that a number of times, and they didn't die when they drank that Kool-Aid in the staging times. So to them, some of them probably sensed that this was different, and so didn't want to do it, and so they put it off. And he was yelling at them to do it. We had the tapes, and then and the kids were crying, and they probably saw people convulsing, and that made them realize that it wasn't a drill. And so some of them tried to run, and some of them were shot after by his henchmen. There's nothing like that with the Heaven's Gate group. Nothing. Zero about them was the same. Well, the only thing that was the same is that they were living somewhat communally. Okay? But you got people all over the world that live communally. That's what cities are too. They're little communities. Big communities. But people don't share, and some people do. Many people do, but many people don't, except with their friends and loved ones. Anyway, so it's I don't think there's any accident to it that New York is the hot spot. I don't hear coming from Washington State that that's a hot spot. I haven't heard that LA was a hot spot, but I know they've got the same lockdowns. But the numbers that are the biggest are coming from, I think they said it was like over 100 deaths now from New York alone. Uh, you know, uh, um, it's I believe it's factual that the tests are different. Different countries have developed different tests, um, and that the tests that the Chinese were using at one point had false positives and false negatives, and repeated testing with different results. They were pulling people out of their homes to make them have a test against their will. It might come to that now. They were talking about that today on the press briefing. That one person was a health person was saying or implying that everybody needs to be tested. And that's been said before. But see, if there's false positives and false negatives, because they don't have the pure virus, because they get the virus from the people, the antibodies. Well, they take the antibodies that developed around the virus, and I guess part of the virus too, I guess maybe is included in there. I'm not sure how that works. If they can isolate the virus from the antibodies that developed around it to try to isolate it so that it could be eliminated from the body. So like I said, like the German doctor said, I forgot his name, but there's a video of him talking in German. Oh no, he was in English. No, he was in German because I had to read it. There were two doctors that said a lot of things that were interesting. And Germany's really been having low rates, but I wonder if the United States doesn't really want to see low rates. So maybe that's why they don't want to force the vaccine, the test on people. If that's the way it goes. Unless they want to falsify the test results to show that people. So I'm not sure how it's going to go because I'm not putting anything past them. They think they have this agenda and they think they are justified in it, and then they're also making it into a political thing for the higher ups. And I don't know if the lower downs, know much about what the higher ups are doing. And then there's higher ups too that are, having different views of this. But in Germany, they said over 30 days they had 10,000 confirmations of the coronavirus in people, but 95.5% of them were showing no symptoms or showing a range of symptoms, but that weren't life-threatening. But they were life-threatening for that other 0.5% of that 10,000 in some old age homes or retirement homes or nursing homes or whatever they were exactly. And so that there were 30 that over 30 days, one person a day died. But the government was thinking about it as expanding, so they were talking about it as what if it grows to 1 million people? Well, that would be 30 people dying every day. And he said, but even still, if it was 30 people dying every day compared to 1 million people, the tests only show that they have coronavirus, doesn't show other viruses that they can have at the same time. Because they said that 7 to 15% of the population, this other doctor said this from Germany, can test positive for COVID-19. But then they can also test positive, another, like 14% of the population can test positive for another flu virus. And there were 2 or 3 others, a number of others actually. It was a whole chart full of about 7 or 8 of them. I don't know how many there were exactly in that chart, that could be included in any one person's body that was. So when they're testing for positive for coronavirus, then that's what they're looking for. So that's what they find, and then they give you a positive result, and they say this many people have been infected, which keeps going up, of course. Because what I'm thinking is happening is that a lot of people were infected by SARS, and coronavirus is part of the SARS virus that peaked in 2003 and had some epidemic in Asia, and but was every place in North America as well, but nobody died in North America. But went to South America, North America, Europe, Asia, but not Africa. And Africa is the last place where this virus started showing up and has the least amount of cases. Now, I don't know if that's changed, but if you think about all the people that were traveling that could have been potentially affected with SARS, that could have mutated now to this other one, and to where a lot of people may be more immune to coronavirus, when other people aren't immune to coronavirus. And then other people, have also better immune systems, younger people generally, but not all the time. Depends on their genetics and what their parents raised them with in terms of their diet and exposure to toxic elements of radioactivity, and from the power plants, and frequency damage from potentially from electronics, and chemicals in paints and everything, lead, and everything, the whole ball of wax, all the viruses that are in animals, that are all bad for the people that don't have an immune system that can flush it out of the system without it doing any damage that we can even see. At the same time, during one or more of those primaries with Biden and Bernie Sanders, Jimmy Dore reported he showed a chart on how far off the exit polls were from the results that were tabulated by the DNC. And they had statistical experts talk about the likelihood of those exit polls, also compared to other exit polls in the past, in the history of voting, how unlikely it was that they were all off. And Jimmy Dore was talking about this when he was talking about this person that was running for Congress, I think, in Florida. I forgot his name. But to where The exit polls were all 5% of the vote in a number of different polling stations. Well, the same 5% that they were that he got votes in those different cities or towns or counties, whatever it was. He got 5% of the vote in a whole bunch of different ones, and that the ballots were destroyed, and that made Debbie Wasserman Schultz get elected in that district. That's the way I understand it. And that Debbie Wasserman Schultz was the one that railroaded. There was some link to Russian interference with the 2016 Democratic Party election, and it has something to do with using Bernie's emails for the Hillary campaign that Bernie might have approved of, and it was also the head of the DNC at the time when Tulsi Gabbard wanted to have more debates, with Bernie Sanders included, with Hillary. But the DNC only allowed 3 debates. And she resigned as co-chair of the DNC then. And so there's conspiracies are the rule now. Conspiracies are the rule now. I believe that's a fact. I mean, they've been the rule for a long time among certain people. I mean, they've been the rule in business ever since there were businesses, ever since there were governments. Conspiracies become the rule to pull one over on the masses, to get them to do the things, to go into the wars. There was war resistance for all the wars. Big war resistance for World War I and II. I think there were like 1 million war resistors in World War I, if I remember correctly, but I might be wrong. I think I got that from Howard Zinn's book, The People's History of the United States, which I don't doubt that. The left doesn't need to, the left and the right doesn't mean anything anymore, in my opinion. It's not like one is good and the other is bad. That's ridiculous. They both have characteristics that are deceitful, and I would call that bad. And they justify those characteristics, like they say they have to have, you need evil. You can't fight. You have to fight evil with evil. Well, that's eye for an eye. Jesus was against that, and yet the Christians will say that, or they'll promote it. I mean, they'll think that it's necessary to go kill Saddam Hussein in case he has weapons of mass destruction in the future, and then wipe out and kill 1 million people, or at least kill and wound and displace at least that much, but maybe even millions more. I heard somebody say that this is karma for the United States. I mean, but everybody doesn't go along with that. There was big peace marches. I was in a peace march in New York City, actually, against the war in Iraq, with my daughter in a stroller. and we were herded around by those big gates. And that was all over the world. There were millions in different, protesting in the United States going to war in Iraq. So there is a karma to that. But the people that give their allegiance to the next level through all this, and to the degree that they know how, and they know about Tiendo, and even if they don't know about Tiendo, but to the degree that they separate from the government, according to Doe, so separate from giving their allegiance to the government, and he used the militia groups as an example of that, but he wasn't promoting violence. I repeat, he wasn't promoting violence, he said. He didn't repeat it, but I'm repeating it. They're separating from the human kingdom in that regard by not believing in what the feds are telling them. A lot of those people are military, and you know that 22 or so people kill themselves every day. That was reported by the Red Cross, even to date, that came back from some military somewhere and had PTSD and didn't want to live anymore through it. There's so many things that, could be done differently about all this. And I'm not saying I'm the authority on it. I'm not an authority, but I can see many things. Like for instance, let's say the people that are dying are in the old people in the nursing homes. Okay, so even that guy that is part of the cabinet of Trump, even he said he hoped everybody got it. And then Jimmy Dore said, which is one of the things that I don't think Jimmy Dore has a good handle on, but he's got a handle on a lot of things pretty well, in my opinion. And I know it's just my opinion. I could be wrong, but was that would be good, because then people would develop immunity to that by getting it a little bit, just the way the measles. They used to have measles parties when I was growing up, and even when I was raising my daughter, they were doing in Stony Brook. They were having measles parties because they wanted the kids to get it, because they knew it wasn't life-threatening if their kids were healthy. I'm not saying if somebody had cancer or something, they would have a measles party when their immune system is so destroyed by chemotherapy or something. That wouldn't be right. But you quarantine everybody because some people's immune system is really bad, and then blame them if they get sick and die because you had the disease but you didn't know it? Or even if you had the disease and you had sniffles and they got it because you didn't know it, that they had that problem. But they're trying to make it sound like the young people that don't have the symptoms need to stay away from society as well. Which, to me, if they really feel like that needs to happen, they're completely deluded to the reality of what's going on. Because it's not that bad yet. If it gets that bad, I don't know what I would say to that. But it's still the same thing, I believe, that if we're separating from the government and the government solutions, and that includes the institutions and all those that are backing the government, whether it's backing the Democrats or backing the Republicans or Libertarians or whatever it is, or backing in Congress and the Senate their decisions. Not just decisions, but practices, like using drugs as the primary way of trying to heal from the disease. I'm not saying that drugs aren't to be used and aren't good to use. I'm just saying that that's not the primary way that they can ensure that they're going to get some protection against them and have a milder case of the coronavirus or any other virus that's happening, whether we're labeling it as a common virus or not. Because every year there's different strains of the flu, and this year has been the worst year. And I think last year was also a really bad year when they had like 20,000 deaths. And this year, or more than that. And this year, according to Dr. Drew, there's been already 18,000 deaths that were associated with the flu. 18,000 deaths just this year in the United States associated with the flu. And the CDC has figures of how many people they think have the flu, which they're guessing to some degree, because everybody that gets the flu doesn't report it. Of course not. We're used to it. We have it every year, a lot of times. I haven't had it every year for a while. Or if I had it, I did have it maybe last year, but the fever was very, very mild, and it only lasted for hours. Well, I slept and I woke up and I didn't have a fever anymore. And it was a mild fever. My daughter gets over fevers very quickly, knock on wood. Thank you, T and Doe. I mean, I wish everybody could be healthy. I do. I wish everybody could go on a transfiguration diet and clean their bodies out so that they can fight off the disease. Back to the chat room. I've been neglecting you there. I'm sorry. Milk Toast says, I've also encountered Doe in a dream state. I've heard that from other people. As long as we know that the potential exists that, well, I've also experienced a dream or two maybe that, I've had like 3 different kinds of dreams with T and or, I never had T and O together. I've had T by herself 2 or 3 dreams. I've had, one of them I didn't actually see T in, but I just saw a spacecraft. And that was before they helped me wake up by a bunch of dreams with Doe in them, where he looked just the way he looks, he was standing talking to a bunch of students. I didn't see any students' faces, but I saw Doe's face and his whole body, actually, standing up, and I was observing from a distance with Sorority as my guide, so to speak. And but I also had a dream or two where Doe seemed to be in it, but as if to say it's okay if you play music, because it was like a question I had because I was criticized for playing music on my, and so I asked him. Well, maybe I mean I was criticized, but I don't know if that's the reason I asked him. Maybe I felt guilty about playing music with so much of my time, and I don't know. I had a dream that I just saw his face like surrounded by what was like a circle that represented music to me in the image I got. Now, I know the Luciferian space aliens can also use our dreams. So that might have been them. I don't know. But I also had in that dream, I had this thing that, which was the same night, I had that dream that was like approving of a certain amount of sexuality with somebody. And that to me wasn't possible to be dough. Then I had a dream with a couple of classmates that what they were saying was just weird, and but maybe I just didn't get it, or I don't remember what it was. But they were doing something weird. I don't remember what it was though. But or saying something weird, or maybe it's just something I didn't want to accept at that time. Because my vehicle definitely had to. I had to get my vehicle accustomed to the idea of thinking of myself in service to Tiendo again. It took a long time to, and a bunch of dreams kind of helped me with that. When I finally asked Doe, I said, do I need to prepare myself to leave my vehicle the way you did? And it came to me in a dream. I feel like it was him like sitting with me. It was like as if he was sitting with me. And when I did sit with him sometimes in person, a few times by myself, and he said, "You need to give your life," which I kind of wanted to hear. Which a buddy of mine, who knew about my story, said to me, "Well, you need to have your vehicle. You need to have your life to give your life, right?" And well, yeah. So I thought, well, I want to give my life, and but I didn't feel like I had. I think I had the option to lay it down. I think it included that option. I don't know if Doe would have prevented it from happening with me, like he did, I believe, with Riccoti, which then Riccoti ended up doing some good things with the information, sending it out and stuff to people. And then he left, and he was allowed to leave that time. I don't think that was accidental, the way that happened. And he didn't leave, but, they said that there were holes in the bags, but he didn't. He checked the bags, he said, and he used more than one bag. That's what he said in the video I watched. I never said anything against Riccoti. Anyway, I've been accused of that. And I've talked about that on my blog a lot, so I'm not going to go through it all now. Then Jay Pollock says, you met Doe in 75. Oh, I already read that one. So Milk Toast then says, keep well, Sawyer. See you next time. Stay cool. Chat. I guess he's probably not listening now. And then Jay Pollock says, when you were invited to follow Tiendo, how did that happen? through them directly in conversation. I went to the meeting in Walport, Oregon, and they were the speakers. They're the only speakers. Their students that had joined them before them were sitting in the audience. And I just, they put a piece of paper that was like a legal size piece of paper that was typewritten and then mimeographed, photocopied, filled with statement 1 fit on it. Statement 1 is in the Heaven's Gate book. And I read it. It was on the chairs. Each of the chairs had that statement. So I read it, and, it was like, okay, it was interesting, but I don't remember anything standing out. Then they went onto the stage, and they sat in these chairs, and the place was packed with probably at least 200 people, standing room in the back. And they looked at us they just, I couldn't see their eyes that well from where I was sitting. I mean, I couldn't really see their eyes at all, I don't think, except generally. I could see that they had eyes, but I couldn't see what they were looking at. But they were appearing to be staring out into the audience. Still sitting down, their legs weren't crossed, and they had their hands on their thighs, I believe. It's kind of the way I picture it. And they were both wearing like the same kind of clothing item, but I didn't know what it was until later when I saw them wearing these blazers that were like some kind of a plastic mix, but thin. And I think they were they had different colors of them. And they seemed to have the same kind of haircut, and they seemed to have gray hair, some gray hair. And then Joe started talking after maybe a minute of silence. And I felt like, I was just glued to every word. I wasn't having any other thoughts about what he was saying, like saying, well, is this true or not true? Or I didn't have any of that. And I was quite a skeptic about things. I would debate Christians all the time about things that they were saying. And I would dance with the Sufis, and I would meditate on Sri Chinmoy's face and think that was ridiculous. And I was reading Bhagavad Gita, and I didn't really find any value to it for myself. Didn't make a lot of sense. I liked concrete things. I liked things that made sense to me, that had a scientific bent to them. Even I was gravitating towards that book, The Scientific View of Christianity, by the Seventh-day Adventists leader. I think Mary Baker Eddy, maybe was her name, wrote. I read that while I was still in high school, my first year out of high school, because a friend of mine had it. I wouldn't have known to go look for something like that. I wasn't interested in reading, but he had it, and so I picked it up and I started reading it. Maybe he gave it to me even. Anyway, but that was like 1969, 70. So then during partway into the meeting, Doe was talking about that children couldn't come with them, because he said that there were some that were following them, that were giving their all to this. It said that in the poster as well. So you knew right from the beginning that and that's what stuck out to me about the poster. that he said that some were giving their all to this. That like jumped out at me as like, oh, wow. And the other thing that stuck out at me at the poster was that they were saying they were from outer space. And I remember saying to my partner, Sarah, I wonder what they're going to look like, if they're from outer space. It's like I didn't doubt that they could have been from outer space. And yet I had very little exposure to the whole subject, except for a time where I heard on the radio what was a broadcast about the Roswell crash, but I only heard about the bodies that were found. And I remember jumping up in my seat and saying to the people that I was with, "Did you hear that?" As if I believed it. That was the only exposure I felt like I had to that subject before that. Anyway, but I heard a person from the back of the room right after he said that about the children not being able to join. I thought it was a woman's voice, very loud, no mistaking it, said, "You ought to be shot." I remember thinking, wow, that's weird. But at that point, I could see in the audience and on the stage, I first saw it out of the corner of my eye in the audience, a haze floating above the people. It wasn't like lit real bright, the room, but it was but the stage had lights on it. And when I turned my eyes to the stage, I saw that there was shimmering light all around them. Like it was denser shimmering, but it looked like more like a haze in the middle of the room. Because I was sitting like kind of in the middle, but towards the right side. I wasn't like right in the middle of the room, so I had a little bit of a view of most of the population of the meeting. Anyway, and then I ended up seeing that shimmering at another meeting that was very well lit in Oklahoma City with Tiendo Talking, where they had us sit on the floor in front of them, facing them. And they told us that we were going to be like a buffer to help them from the negative thinking, I think, and from the discarnates that would be sending arrows at them, which happened. And I know about those arrows. I feel I get those arrows thrown at me. It comes like in thoughts that are saying that's full of baloney, that's stupid, that's ridiculous. You're brainwashed. You're naive. You're dangerous because you believe in this, and you're suicidal, or all those thoughts that's arrows. Yeah, Vendo canceled the fast after 12 days of water, and we broke the fast on citrus that came from Yuma. Delicious. Some very sweet tangerines and tangelos. And boy, did I get constipated from that. It was terrible. It was terrible. It was painful. But Doe felt like that was not the best way to break a fast. Now that could have been a test for some people. why didn't Doe know the best way to break the fast, right? But so Doe could have been led to actually not become aware of that, because he researched a lot of things before he put us through anything. I know that because he included some of the students in his research, talking about it sometimes. Because I was an overseer, and so sometimes I would be privy to certain meetings that happened with overseers. Not that many. And there weren't anything that he didn't end up telling the rest of the group. But sometimes I just heard about it directly from him. Because they always said when they got into a subject that they wanted everybody to know about, because they, cause if he was just exploring different options with some, that was just nobody else's business. There was always a need to know or a need to be participatory. They didn't feel like they had to say everything to everybody at the same time. And you can see the evidence of that in the way they talked about going to retreat in the Black Hawk tapes. To where T said that if the weather's really bad, they're going to cancel. And those individuals will just go to the end of the cycle and see if you can take it like a member of the next level would take it. Not feel like you were missing out because you don't need to go to retreat. T said all that. Then Jake Pollock says, let's see, it says 12-day fast. That's incredible. Yeah, we did 30 days. No, we did 39 days on the Burroughs cleanser. We also did shorter fasts on the Burroughs cleanser. And then the Burroughs cleanser became a option to replace a meal. We did a 3-day apple juice fast. That's how we started the fasting routine. We had a liquid diet while T was still in her vehicle for, I think, a month or more. There was a protein drink, and then they added yeast rolls to it. And then we had the transfiguration diet, which is a fast of sugar. You don't have any sugar in it, except for honey and maple syrup and fruit sugars. Well, not fruit sugars in like the fructose form, but in the natural form of the fruit. But dried fruits were used as our sweets. Raisins and raisin balls we would make, mixing them with coconut into balls. And we're also fasting from all flesh foods and all dairy, so no cheeses or anything, and no flours, except for the slow grain cooking, wheat, rye, berries, and barley that we made into soups. The wheat and rye were for like a breakfast, and the barley and was part of a dish, and potato soup, and a lot of potatoes, a lot of olive oil, a lot of garlic. You prick the cloves and you put them in the bottle of garlic so that the oil gets infused with the benefits of the garlic, so it's not killed in cooking. But we also put garlic in cooking, like cooking beans and rice. We did have beans and rice, that's right. But not in the initial transfiguration diet. We had that before the transfiguration diet with T, and also after the transfiguration diet, because we changed diets. Don't thought there was a value to changing diets. And I think I've seen some of that, to where if I stay away from something, like I stay away from white potatoes because certain ones I have allergic to, and I don't know how to tell which ones I do have allergic to. And it's not a severe allergy, but I'll break out with a little bit of a rash. And but that doesn't seem to always happen, or maybe it does. I'm just not recognizing it. Maybe I'm having that response to cheese now too, because I stay away from it and then I get a little bit of a rash. But I didn't get that rash on my forehead. I was getting like at one point I was getting like a shingles kind of thing, like a little whiteheads on my nose and one or two, and in my eyebrow and things like that. And that stopped by going on to the cayenne pepper is a big help to our diets and our cleansing. If we do nothing else but the cayenne, it would be great for people to get used to it. The formula is a teaspoon. Well, no, start with as little as you want to start with if you're really sensitive to it. But I wasn't sensitive to it that much because I used it a lot, because I used it in the classroom throughout, as a seasoning, like on salads and fruit and baked potatoes and anyway, but and broccoli, whatever, we used it. We used black pepper also, but if you are accustomed to it, then you can try to start with like a quarter teaspoon in about 6 ounces of water. You mix it up, and it's the granulated pepper. It's the pepper powder, and of course that amount. If you really have a hot BTU, you might even start with less than that. Doesn't hurt to start with less, but I wouldn't start with more until you can see how your body reacts to less. And then on 2 occasions I almost passed out, but my vehicle always had a history of passing out from heat, and you get heated up. Your stomach and your whole body gets heated up, and you got to spit out the mucus that it draws out of your body. That's how you know it's working, because that's the cells cleansing themselves. And it will kind of stimulate diarrhea a little, or just not diarrhea, but looser stool. And but it doesn't have to. Depends on what you eat, also, whether you have really loose stool. But you do want to be regular. So if you're someone that tends to be constipated, on a cleansing diet, you need to take something. An herbal thing would be best to try to stay regular, to have solid elimination every day. But but you chase that quarter teaspoon or less of cayenne pepper in a 6 ounces of water with another 5 or 6 ounces of water, and then and that helps to get it out of the throat so that it doesn't burn the sensitive tissue. I think they didn't say all that, but I think I can see that could be one of the benefits of doing that, chasing it. And then also when we take a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, the unfiltered kind, so it still has the mother in it. Fermented products are really good for our health and our digestive system. And so you take that right after that, and then chase that with a little water. And so that even, probably starts to digest those particles that are still in your throat after you wash it down. Well, I don't know if it does or not, but digest it, because digestion starts in the But the fermented things are good for your digestive system. So I just haven't studied them to the degree of where they become a value immediately. So then Jeff says, so the gray alien looking older member is just a vehicle, right? Yes, that's their vehicle. That's not their soul body. But they can have other vehicles of different shapes and colors and sizes. Even a spacecraft could actually be a vehicle for the next level, for the soul body to drive. The soul, though, talked about as being like a plasma consistency, and I believe that you can have different density of that, or different force, or power, however you want to say it. The more you grow the soul, which we start to do by wanting to be a student of Tiendo. And that can start before then, depending on what your lessons are and how you've been asking in your own way throughout your life. Because I don't think anybody that would want to be a student of Tiendo doesn't have a soul pocket deposited into their human vehicle or around their human vehicle. No, deposited into their human vehicle, because it's the human vehicle that's wrapped around the soul, so it becomes the container that holds the soul and the spirit of the vehicle's flesh, and that includes the genetic memory and the diseases that they had in the past, and in whatever form they're saved as being the record of, and which is the flesh is affected by. It becomes something that can be overcome when the time clock goes off for it. Time clock goes off for it. With old age is part of that. Certain things aren't a problem until we get to a certain age. I guess the vehicle's system degrades, and that becomes a stimulus for whatever diseases caused that system to degrade in the past. That we can reverse by our minds, and there's the meditation for that. That is just sitting in a quiet place. I mean, it doesn't have to be sitting, but and thinking about the mind from the next level as light coming into the top of our vehicle's head, and going into the pineal gland and spreading out from there throughout every cell of the body, and bringing healing about in every cell of the body. I've used it many times. I very rarely get to the whole body, but I've learned to minimize what I think I need to feel, that I interpret as feeling that light going through my whole body. Because I think you might be able to get too, well, no, I think there's degrees in which we can feel it actually happening. And like envision it, what I mean by feel. Not that I actually feel it with my senses of the vehicle. But then, if there's extra senses, the third eye sense, right, which I think there is, then I think I feel it with that. The same way that when I'm trying to block a thought that I don't want to have, I can feel that I'm putting up a pressure against that thought in my mind, along with the blank card. Because the blank card doesn't have to actually see the cue card and that it's blank. It becomes like just like a feeling of a force, like an energy that's actually putting up a block to that thought. And you can do that by cutting off the thought, and you can do it by not having it at all, and even sensing that thought's characteristics before they enter your brain as a thought. I got to that point, and now I'm not saying that the next level hadn't given me a lot. They had. They gave us all a lot of, a dose of their mind that gave us the ability to do these things so that we would see the results of them. And that becomes faith. Faith is the evidence of things unseen, according to Paul, which was Doe had me quote on the Beyond Human tapes. Faith is the evidence of things unseen. One of the things that Paul said that was right on, or Doe wouldn't have had me quote it. Where otherwise, Paul was the number one reason why Christians got way off track, because some of the things he said about grace. In other words, yes, you're forgiven of your sins if you ask to be, if you want to be, and if you want to try to grow from not doing them anymore. Those things that we consider sins are the things that we miss the mark on. I mean, Tiendo give us the very difficult goal. And so the task, the process of overcoming is to keep on reaching for that goal. And no matter how close we get to it, not stopping and asking the next level to help us each time we slip. And trying to employ the things that would have us not slip. Like, staying away from that person that wants to sell you sex, or staying away from that person that wants to have you do certain drugs that you want to stay away from, or never buying cigarettes if you want to conquer your habit to tobacco or tobacco products, smoking them, or anything, whatever it is. Growing in the craft. I'm getting to that too late, so I'm not sure what it's referring to. Well, next level vehicles are grown in their laboratories, like on a vine, and according to Doe, and they're not the same kind of material as human vehicles. And they don't have the same kind of organs. I don't know what kind of organs they have. But they have things they can do. They can travel without walking, by lifting off the ground so they can glide around. Now, it takes the next level member, though, that built their mind through the teachings of the older members to be able to get the vehicle to do that, using our mind to do it. The same way we get the vehicle to walk, right? And some people lose that ability to make their vehicle walk, and they have to relearn it. So the same technology is there. T and Doug talked about that, how that we didn't have to get rid of the influences that help us learn to walk. The discarnates. They said there were discarnates that help people walk. Note that children have to be taught to walk, even though it comes pretty easily to them, right? All right, you all. I'm thinking that I want to bring this to a close, and I mean, there were probably other things I wanted to bring up. I didn't get to the scripture things I wanted to talk about. The face of dough is still showing that we still have the chance. I said that, I think, in that music video that I made that's pinned to the top of my YouTube channel, 3SPM, as you're on right now. There's a lot to say about that. The reason why I said that, and some of it is evidenced by things Doe taught, and some of them are coming from the scripture in the opening of the sixth seal that produces a great earthquake that has never been seen before, of that size and scope on the earth. And part of that is that causes that, and the removal of the scroll, the heaven, which is like a database, I think maybe like a spacecraft, moving away from the planet. And that causes the people that are in line with the beast to try to go and hide in their underground caves. And they want to be hidden from the face of the Lord. I think that's the way it's put, which I believe is the face of dough, that I think they will somehow see as Dough's face in whatever spacecraft comes where Dough is on board, because they could transmit, because just Dough being that close might be transmitting his power of his mind and the minds of his crew. And that might be this Comet Atlas. That might get to a certain spot and then just stop. It's going to blow a lot of minds. Or it might come and pass us and then come back again another time. And they might not even call it Atlas, because they might not know that it's the same. It might not even be the same comet. Because Doe might not be in, I'm not saying Doe's in the comet. I'm not saying it's not possible that there could be a spacecraft inside that. But that could be Doe's vehicle that he's piloting, in addition to whatever else he's doing in the management of these last days. And T is involved as well in it. I don't know if T is on that same spacecraft. I mean, they've been doing some things in twos quite a bit. Like Comet Honda was like two objects, according to the person that depixelized it. and I saw that, what they made it look like. I think it's on one of my pages. But and then Pan-STARRS had a black object. That's what it looked like in front of its coma, of a huge comet coma. And then there was several others that had objects following them, and objects that were visible because of a comet that went by and caused Mars to glow, and that shed light on this object that looked like a donut, so to speak, but it looked like it was more rounded than a donut, so like a ball with a hole in it, or a black hole in it. Wow. And in New York, in the Statue of Liberty, I think, did I say that already? Depicted those 7 rays that were shooting out, which I think are the 7. They can be taken as being the 7 spirits of God that talked about in the book of Revelation. But they could also be the 7 space aliens, because it's related to the 7 heads of the beast and the 7 members of the Luciferian space alien group. That they are riding herd on the 7 heads of the beast. In control of, to try to build spacecraft so they can get off this planet, and to find that element that gives them anti-gravity that Bob Lazar talked about, that Bush talked about, hoping to find, saying it would boggle the mind. Hopefully we would, by making colonies on the moon and Mars, we might find an element, a resource, an energy resource that would boggle the mind. That's what he said. Not that Doe's coming back with that Applewhite vehicle, no, but his identity and the fact that he had that vehicle is in his mind, because he learned a lot from operating that vehicle. Now, I may be wrong about that. I mean, but see, so his mind, his identity as being that same person, people that experienced that and saw his vehicle, what they would get when he would transmit the reality of who he is, and that he's here in this object that they're looking at that might look like a star or a comet. They might have the thought of, wow, that's the face of that cult leader. And he would be tormented by that because of how they thought he was evil. That's what it says in the Revelation. So that might be accurate, that part of it. They certainly are building underground bases in cities. I've seen quite a bit of evidence of that. Kansas City was one place where they built a total underground mall. You could say, well, why would they do that? How much more expensive is it to build an underground mall? Well, maybe it was related to a train. Okay, so I mean, that's what the Grand Central Station is, and Penn Station has that. And BART has that, and other places. Pittsburgh has it. All right, Well, Statue of Liberty also relates to Revelation 17 and 18. Talk about different aspects of it. I think it's on a foundation that's related to 10, like the G10, which would be the 10 horns, or the 10 militaries that are controlling the planet now. The 10 financial systems that are controlling the planet right now. 10 different countries. The financial ministers are the ones that meet when they have the G10. And then they have the G20 and the G12 maybe, and they had, so there's all kinds of variations of it, but those are the first ones that happened. And it became the G8 with Russia's addition, but then it didn't remain that way. And there's even talks about how some have fallen in Revelation 17 and 18, which I'm going to try to go through that material, but another time, because I'm kind of worn out. So good night, folks. Sayonara.